The Malthari cruiser Echo of Dawn drifted through the void like a shard of broken crystal, its flowing organic hull shimmering with aurora hues. Commander Malvar stood at the observation deck, his six-fingered hands resting against the translucent panel. The stars beyond pulsed cold and indifferent, but his gaze was fixed on the single anomaly flickering in the darkness. A distress beacon, ancient and nearly spent. It was a relic, a ghost. The signal was weak, barely more than a whisper, but its origin signature was unmistakable. Human. Malvar's secondary eyelids flicked shut for a moment, shielding his violet eyes from the glare of the ship's bioluminescent displays. The archives had warned of them. The Malthari collective had spent centuries scrubbing their history of the species' name, burying it beneath layers of myth and half-truths. Demons of the void, the old texts called them, creatures of impossible resilience, of wrath that burned worlds. And yet, here was their call. Commander. Thalolan's voice was a soft chime, the scientist's crystalline exoskeleton catching the ambient glow of the bridge. The signal is confirmed, pre-collapse era. Human. Malvar exhaled through his ventral vents, the air hissing between his ribs. Location. Dead system. No planets. No stations, just wreckage. A graveyard then. The Echo of Dawn adjusted course, its flowing metal alloys bending space with a hum of ionized energy. As they neared, the scanners painted the devastation in stark relief. Twisted metal husks, shattered orbital platforms, the skeletal remains of warships that had died screaming. And among the ruins, a single intact vessel. It was small, a lifeboat perhaps. Its design was archaic, its hull pitted by centuries of micrometeorite impacts. But the beacon still pulsed. Malvar's claws flexed. Protocol demanded he leave it. The collective had laws about disturbing human remnants, about awakening what should stay buried. But the signal was still active, and that meant someone was alive. Prepare a boarding team, he said. Thalolan's bioluminescent patterns flickered in alarm. Commander, the archives are 500 years out of date. Malvar turned, his voice low. If Therese a survivor, we retrieve them. Quietly before the rest of the galaxy notices, the boarding pod detached with a silent ripple of displaced energy, its crystalline surface refracting the dim starlight. Inside, Malvar's team moved with practiced precision, their armor glinting like frozen amethyst. The airlock of the human vessel hissed open, not with resistance, but with eerie surrender, as if it had been waiting for them. The interior was dark, cold. The walls were lined with primitive cryo. Pods, their glass frosted over, their systems dead. All but one. Malvar approached, his breath fogging in the stale air. The pod's display flickered, a single line of text. Archaic but unmistakable. Cryo status. Active. He reached out, wiped the frost away, and found himself staring into the face of a child. A human child. Small, fragile, dark curls matted against pale skin, their chest rising in slow, artificial breaths. The pod systems were failing, its power reserves nearly depleted. Another few decades and the last spark would gutter out. Thalolan made a sound like fracturing ice. This is impossible. Malvar didn't answer. His mind raced through the implications. A living human, a child. The collective would demand it, be handed over, dissected, studied, or destroyed. The pod's display flickered again. A final warning, power critical. Malvar made his decision. Bring them aboard. Thalolan stiffened. Commander. The scientist hesitated, then nodded. The team moved swiftly, detaching the pod with careful urgency. As they carried it back to the Echo of Dawn, Malvar cast one last glance at the derelict around them. Somewhere in the dark, something watched. And for the first time in centuries, the galaxy trembled. Section. Fae. The weight of mercy. The Echo of Dawn hummed with the quiet tension of a storm gathering at the edge of perception. The human child, still suspended in its failing stasis pod, lay in the center of the medical bay, bathed in the pale violet glow of Malthari diagnostic arrays. The air smelled of ozone and the faint metallic tang of ancient machinery, the scent of something old and wrong clinging to the pod's battered surface. Malvar stood motionless, his crystalline fingers resting against the pod's cracked interface. The display flickered, its archaic script barely legible, but one line burned clear: life support failure imminent. Thalolan worked in silence, his bioluminescent veins pulsing with subdued agitation as he adjusted the ship's systems to accommodate the pod's failing power grid. His movements were precise, but Malvar could see the tremor in his hands, the same tremor that had plagued every Malthari who had ever heard the old warnings. They do not die. They do not forget. The child's face was unnervingly peaceful. Malvar's mandibles tightened. The collective's edicts were clear. Any trace of human presence was to be reported immediately. The last war had ended in fire and silence, the humans vanishing into the void, their fleets shattered, their worlds scoured. The Malthari had thought them extinct, a relic, a myth, and now here lay the proof that they had been wrong. Thalolan exhaled sharply, his voice barely above a whisper. "Commander, if we awaken it, we do not know what it is." Malvar interrupted. The scientist hesitated. "It is a child." Malvar's secondary eyes flickered toward the pod's readouts. The stasis field was degrading. If they did nothing, the human would die within hours. A part of him, the part that remembered the old stories, the whispered horrors of human resilience, wondered if that would be the wiser choice. But then the child stirred, just a twitch, a faint, reflexive curl of fingers. Malvar's breath caught. Thalolan stepped back, his bioluminescence flaring in alarm. "It's a leave." Malvar finished. The pod's systems whined, a final, desperate surge of power stabilizing the stasis field. For now, Malvar turned away, his mind racing. The collective would demand answers. They would take the child, or worse, they would kill it out of fear. Thalolan's voice was hollow. "What do we do?" Malvar did not answer immediately. Instead, he reached out, his fingers hovering over the pod's surface. The cold of deep space still clung to it, a reminder of the centuries it had spent adrift. And yet, against all odds, the human within had survived. He made his decision. "Seal the records," he said at last. "Tell no one." Thalolan's spine stiffened. "That is treason." Malvar's voice was steel. "That is mercy." Outside the viewport, the derelict human ship loomed in the dark, its shattered hull a tomb for the dead. But here, in the heart of the echo of dawn, something far more dangerous stirred. A beginning, the echo of dawn hummed softly as it drifted away from the derelict human vessel, its crystalline hull shimmering with the faint aurora of its ion drives. The ship's interior pulsed with the steady rhythm of Malthari technology, bioluminescent veins of energy tracing through walls of translucent alloy, casting shifting violet shadows across the command deck. Malvar stood motionless before the central data spire, his claws hovering over its interface. The spire's surface rippled at his touch, responding to his biosignature, but the information it displayed was not Malthari. It was human. The pod's stasis logs had been fragmented, corrupted by centuries of exposure, but enough remained to paint a terrifying picture. The child, Helen, the records named her, had not been alone. The ship had carried thousands, a colony vessel, a desperate flight, and something had hunted them. Thalolan's spines flickered with unease as he studied the data streams. These readings, they don't match any known species. Malvar's throat tightened. The logs spoke of shadows, entities that moved between the stars, silent, relentless. They had torn through the human ship like a storm, through paper, slaughtering crew and colonists alike. Only the stasis pod had escaped. jettisoned in the chaos, left to drift through the void. Thalolin exhaled sharply. This can't be real. Nothing moves like this. Nothing hunts like this. Malvar said nothing. His mind raced back to the ancient archives of the Malthari, to the oldest, most forbidden texts, the Vorathi, the demons of the void, a myth, a warning. A chime from the spire interrupted his thoughts. The pod's medical scans had completed their analysis. The child was waking up. Malvar turned toward the containment chamber, his pulse quickening. The stasis field flickered, its energy fluctuating as the pod system struggled to stabilize. Inside, the small human form stirred, her fingers twitching. Thalolin took a step back. We should terminate the revival sequence. If she wakes, Malvar interrupted, his voice low. She will be the first living human we have ever seen, and she may be the only one who knows what happened out there. The pod hissed, its seals releasing in a burst of vapor. The stasis field collapsed, a shuddering breath. The child's eyes snapped open. They were green. Not the pale, pupil, less glow of Malthari eyes, but deep, vivid, alive. For a heartbeat, there was silence. Then Helen screamed, not in fear and recognition. Her small hands clawed at the pod's interior, her voice raw with a terror that went beyond confusion. Beyond pain, she was looking past them. At something in the dark, Malvar whirled, but there was nothing there, only the shifting glow of the echo's bioluminescent walls. Yet the child kept screaming, as if she could still see them. The shadows, the child's screams echoed through the echo of dawn, reverberating off the crystalline walls, until the very ship seemed to shudder with her terror. Malvar's pulse thrummed in his secondary veins, a rapid, discordant rhythm that mirrored the chaos unfolding before him. Helen, the human, was not afraid of them. She was afraid of something else. Her small fingers curled into fists, her green eyes wide and unblinking, fixed on the empty space behind the Malthari scientists. Thalolin had frozen, his bioluminescent markings flickering erratically, his normally composed demeanor shattered by the raw animal fear radiating from the child. Malvar reached out, his hand hovering just above her shoulder. He had studied human physiology, knew their skin was fragile, their bones brittle compared to Malthari carapace. But nothing in the archives had prepared him for this, for the way her breath hitched, the way her pupils dilated until they swallowed the green of her irises. She was terrified. Not from the child, not from the ship, from outside, a deep, resonant pulse, like the heartbeat of some vast, unseen leviathan. The echo's atmospheric condensers whined as the energy readings spiked, the translucent panels along the walls flaring violet, white before dimming again. Malvar's blood ran cold. That wasn't possible. They were alone in this sector. The echo had drifted for centuries, untouched, undisturbed, until today, Thalolin's voice was barely a whisper. Captain, the scanners. Malvar didn't need to look, he already knew. Something was out there, and it was answering Helen's screams. The bridge of the echo was a storm of activity. Malthari crew moving in silent, efficient urgency, as the ship's organic systems reacted to the anomaly. The main display flickered, its flowing aurora patterns disrupted by jagged distortions. Something was interfering with their sensors, something powerful. Malvar's claws tapped against the command console, the rhythmic motion the only outward sign of his unease. The echo was a relic, yes, but it was still a Malthari vessel. Its defenses should have been more than enough to mask their presence. The pulse came again, closer this time. Thalolin's hands trembled as he adjusted the scanners, his voice tight. It's not a ship. At least, not like any we've ever seen. The energy signature, it's alive, or partially organic. I can't. He broke off as the display flared crimson, a warning glyph, flashing. Proximity alert. Malvar's secondary heart skipped a beat. Directly ahead of them, space rippled, not the smooth distortion of a warp signature, but a violent, unnatural warping. as if reality itself were being torn apart. And then, a shape emerged. Not a vessel, not a creature, something in between, a vast obsidian mass, its surface, shifting like liquid shadow, threaded through with veins of violet energy. It had no clear form, no wings, no hull, no recognizable structure. It simply was a living darkness that drank in the light around it. The bridge fell silent. Every Malthari aboard knew what they were seeing. The archives had names for such things. The Eaters of Light, Malvar's breath caught. They were myths, legends, stories told to younglings to warn them of the dangers lurking in the uncharted black. But the humans had known they were real, and now Helen's screams had drawn one to them. In the medical bay, the child had gone still. Her chest rose and fell rapidly, her small frame trembling, but her screams had ceased. Instead, she stared at the ceiling, her green eyes wide and unblinking, as if she were listening. Then, slowly, her lips parted. A single word whispered in a language none of the Malthari could understand. But the thing outside did. The pulse came again, louder, hungrier, and the echo of dawn shuddered as the first tendril of shadow brushed against its hull. Section. Faye, the Zarathi warning, the echo of dawn trembled. Not from impact, not from weapons fire, but from the mere presence of the thing outside. The shadow pulsed against the hull like a living thing, its edges drinking in the bioluminescent glow of the Malthari ship's energy conduits. The light dimmed where it touched, as if the darkness itself were starving. Malvar's talons dug into the command console, his crystalline carapace flickering with reflexive auroras of alarm. The bridge crew had frozen, their silver-violet eyes locked on the main display, where the void beyond their ship was no longer empty. It was watching them. Thalolan's voice was a whisper, barely audible over the ship's shuddering systems. The archives, they spoke of this. Malvar didn't need the reminder. Every Malthari knew the old warnings. The Zarathi texts, carved into the oldest aerogel monoliths of their homeworld, spoke of creatures that fed on light, on life, on the very energy that powered their civilization. They are drawn to fear, the ancient scripts had said, to the cries of the lost, and the human child had screamed. A new alert flared across the console, a power drain, rapid and unnatural. The echo's energy signatures were being siphoned, pulled toward the shadow like water into a black hole. The ship's atmospheric condensers stuttered, their luminous purple, white streams flickering as if suffocated. Malvar's mind raced. They had no weapons for this, no shields. The Malthari had never fought the Voidborn, only fled from them. Long ago, when their ancestors had first taken to the stars. Then, a voice cut through the silence. Colonel Harriman to bridge. Status report. Helen's tone was steel, unshaken. Malvar didn't know how she had pulled herself together so quickly. But the human commander's presence was a lifeline in the growing dark. "We have a problem," Malvar replied. His vocal harmonic strained, the child's distress call. It wasn't just us who heard it. A pause, then, sharp and clear, Voidborn. Malvar's breath caught. "You know of them. We've met." The words carried a weight that sent a chill through the bridge. The humans had encountered these things before, and lived to speak of it. The echo lurched violently as the shadow coiled tighter, its tendrils pressing against the hull like fingers testing the strength of a cage. The lights dimmed further, the ship's energy bleeding away into the dark. Then, a new sound, a hum deep and resonant, vibrating through the deck plates. Malvar turned and saw Captain Shepard at the secondary station, his hands flying across the controls. The human had bypassed the Malthari interface entirely, jacking directly into the ship's systems with a neural link from his combat suit. His eyes were closed, his expression focused, as if listening to something only he could hear. "Shepard," Helen began. "Give me a second," he muttered. "I've got an idea." The hum grew louder. The echo's energy signatures flared, not fading now, but shifting, redirecting. The ship's atmospheric ionizers, designed to stabilize their environment, suddenly surged, their pale violet streams twisting into a new configuration. The Lowland's eyes widened. "He's repurposing our condensers, creating an energy pulse." Shepard's lips curled into a grim smile. "Voidborn feed on fear, right? Let's give him something else to chew on." With a final keystroke, he activated the sequence. The echo of dawn lit up like a supernova. Every bioluminescent panel, every crystalline conduit, every flowing power current flared at once, flooding the space around the ship with a blinding wave of purple-white radiance. The shadow recoiled, not just retreating, but writhing, as if burned. For the first time, Malthari saw its shape clearly, a vast amorphous mass of darkness, its edges fraying like smoke in a gale. It twisted away from the light, its hunger momentarily thwarted, but it wasn't gone, and it wasn't alone. The scanners screamed a warning as new signatures emerged from the void, more shadows, drawn by the pulse, by the scent of prey. Helen's voice was calm, deadly. "Shepard, time for Plan B." The captain didn't hesitate. "Already on it?" His fingers flew across the console, inputting commands no Malthari could have conceived. "Brace for jump." Malthari barely had time to process the words before the Echo's engines roared to life. Not in their usual graceful flow, but in a violent, shuddering surge. The humans had overridden the safety protocols, forcing the ship into an emergency warp. The last thing Malthari saw before the stars blurred was the Voidborn swirling like storm clouds, their hunger undiminished, and the realization struck him like a hammer blow. The humans hadn't just known about the Voidborn. They had survived them, and now, so had the Malthari section Fae. The ghost fleet awakens, the warp jump tore, through Malthari's senses like claws through silk. His crystalline nervous system flared with agony as the Echo bucked violently, its organic architecture groaning under stresses no Malthari vessel was meant to endure. The ship's bioluminescent panels flickered erratically, casting jagged violet shadows across the bridge as atmospheric condensers hissed steam through fractured conduits. Through the pain, one thought burned brighter than the warp core's fury. The humans had done this before. Not just survived, fought. The Echo re-entered real space with a shudder that sent hairline fractures spiderwebbing through its translucent bulkheads. Malthari's secondary eyelids snapped open, revealing a starfield choked with debris, twisted metal, shattered crystalline spars, the carcasses of ships older than Malthari civilization, and among the wreckage. At first, Malthari mistook them for more Voidborn, those formless horrors that had pursued them. But these shapes had structure, purpose, angular, brutalist silhouettes. Their hulls, pitted by centuries of cosmic abrasion, yet still humming with dormant energy. Human vessels, but not like the sleek warships of the modern fleet. These were relics. The Lowland's trembling fingers danced across the scanner array, her bioluminescent veins pulsing frantic violet. "By the first winds." Her voice was a whisper, drowned by the static of dead civilizations. These signatures, they matched the archives, the demon wars. Malthari's breath crystallized in his throat. Every Malthari child knew the legends, the ancient scourge that had nearly erased their species before vanishing into myth. A foe so relentless, so hungry, that their ancestors had purged all records of their true nature. Only now did he understand. The demons had never been myths. They'd been human. Colonel Harriman rose from her command chair, her silhouette backlit by the Echo's failing auroras. She didn't glance at the scanners, didn't need to. Her posture spoke of grim familiarity. "Shepard, wake them up." Captain Shepard's grin was a blade in the gloom. His hands moved with the precision of a man executing a ritual. A single encrypted pulse lanced from the Echo's comm array, a whisper in a graveyard. The response was immediate. Deep within the derelict fleet, lights flickered to life, not the Malthari's soft bioluminescence, but the harsh, unforgiving glare of Terran reactors. Power conduits flared crimson as ancient systems groaned awake. Hull plating shifted, shedding millennia of cosmic dust. Not through comms, not through any frequency the Malthari could comprehend. It vibrated through the echo's very structure, a basso profundo growl that resonated in Malvar's marrow. Identify command authority. Harriman didn't flinch. Authorization Hades. 7, Niner, voiceprint Harriman. Helen, Colonel, Terran Starcore. A pause. The derelicts hummed, their weapon port cycling with the slowness of glaciers. Then, authorization confirmed. Stand by for synapse reinitialization. Thalolan stumbled back as the scanner array overloaded, vomiting data. Their systems, they're not just dormant, they're alive. Neural networks, organic, machine hybrids. These ships have been sleeping, not dead. Malvar watched in dawning horror as the largest derelict, a monstrous wedge of blackened armor, began unfolding like some grotesque metal flower. Its core yawned open, revealing a pulsating crimson light. Not a reactor, Shepard exhaled sharply. Hell yeah, the old dogs still know how to bite. Harriman's eyes never left the awakening fleet. Malvar, her voice was quiet, but it carried the weight of stellar cores. You asked why we never told you about the Voidborn. The Malthari commander turned, his crystalline skin reflecting the hellish glow of the resurrected armada. Harriman's smile was a funeral shroud. Because last time we fought them, the derelict's engines ignited in unison, their exhaust plumes staining the void with the color of old blood section. The price of survival, the void between stars had never felt so small. Malvar's command spire trembled as the first of the ancient human warships completed its awakening, a soundless scream of reactivated systems that sent shockwaves through the Malthari fleet's sensor arrays. The derelict's hull, pitted by millennia of cosmic radiation, now pulsed with veins of crimson energy, its armor plates shifting like the scales of some primordial leviathan stirring from slumber. Organic machine hybrids. Thalolan's claws dug into his console, bioluminescent panels flaring violet with stress. The data cascading across his screens defied every known law of Malthari engineering. These weren't mere ships, they were organisms, and they were hungry. Colonel Harriman watched the tactical feed with the stillness of a predator counting heartbeats before the strike. The Titan's Wrath, her flagship, hung motionless beside the Malthari armada, its railgun batteries humming at fade charge. Shepard's voice crackled over the combat channel, tight with adrenaline. Orders, Colonel. She didn't answer immediately, her eyes traced the unfolding horror, the way the Voidborn vessels moved wrong, their trajectories bending like limbs rather than following Newtonian arcs. The largest of them, that grotesque wedge now glowing from within, extruded tendrils of blackened metal that lashed out to taste the surrounding debris field. A Malthari scout probe drifted too close. The tendril struck faster than plasma fire. One moment the probe was there, a sleek dart of crystalline silver. The next, it unraveled, its aerogel superstructure dissolving into fractal dust as the Voidborn ship absorbed it. Thalolan's horrified gasp echoed across the bridge. They're harvesting. Malvar's secondary limbs twitched toward the evacuation alarm. Every instinct screamed at him to retreat, to preserve what remained of his people. But the human commander's words anchored him. We lost. Not just a battle. A war. The evidence hung in the void before them. Twisted wrecks that had drifted for centuries, their very design a testament to desperation. Harriman's fleet bore the same scars in their architecture, overlapping armor layers, redundant shield generators, spinal, mounted weapons built for mutual annihilation. These were not the ships of conquerors. They were the weapons of the cornered. Shepard's fighter banked hard as the first Voidborn vessel fully activated its drive. The wake it left wasn't plasma or ion trails. It was a tear, space itself recoiling from the abyssal heat of its passage. His targeting AI shrieked warnings as it calculated the monstrosity's velocity. "Colonel, they're accelerating at Fey gravities and not slowing down." Harriman's fingers tightened around her command interface. The Voidborn weren't maneuvering, they were lunging, and the Malthari fleet lay directly in their path. Thalolan's console exploded with damage reports before the first impact. The Voidborn wedge ship struck the Malthari forward picket like a comet. Except comets didn't change shape mid-collision. At the last nanosecond, its prow split open into a maw of vibrating filaments, shearing through reinforced crystalline hulls as if they were wet parchment. Malvar's warriors died without screams. Their bioelectric comms simply ceased as the Voidborn ship consumed them, its crimson core flaring brighter with each absorption. Harriman's voice cut through the chaos, colder than interstellar vacuum. "Shepard, burn their eyes out." Across the human fleet, 1,000 railgun capacitors discharged in unison. The void turned white. Malvar would later remember the silence most of all. The way the human projectiles, slivers of tungsten accelerated to Fei, crossed the distance without fanfare. No roaring missiles, no dazzling energy beams. Just death, delivered at the speed of a closing gate. The Voidborn wedge ship shattered, not exploded. Not ruptured, shattered. Its grotesque hull fracturing along sudden fault lines as relativistic kinetics reduced its nightmare biology to shrapnel. The largest fragment, a twitching spire of black metal, spun past the Titan's Wrath's viewports. For one horrifying instant, Malvar saw movement within its ruptured chambers, pale, fibrous masses that twitched as they died. Then the secondary explosions began. The lowland sensors overloaded again, this time from the cascade of antimatter detonations ripping through the Voidborn fleet. Human warheads, impossibly ancient yet perfectly functional, found reactors and tore them open with star-core fury. The Malthari scientists trembled. They hadn't just preserved these ships, they'd baited them. Harriman finally turned from the carnage, her reflection warped in the curved violet glass of Malvar's command spire. "Now you understand," she said softly. "This is why we never stopped building weapons, why we never dismantled the warfleets." Outside, the last Voidborn ship crumpled under a concentrated plasma lance strike, its heart, light guttering out like a drowned candle. Malvar looked at the human commander, really looked, and saw the truth in the scars across her knuckles, the neural interface ports along her temples, the way her pupils dilated slightly too slow for a baseline human. The price of survival wasn't just ships, it was becoming them. The silence in the command spire was thick enough to choke on. Malvar's crystalline fingers hovered over the tactical display, the holographic remnants of the Voidborn fleet, still flickering in the air like dying embers. His mind raced, reassembling the pieces of history that had been scattered across 1,000 Malthari archives. The ancient warnings, the myths of a species that had fought the Voidborn and won. And now, here they stood. Not as demons, but as saviors. Colonel Harriman remained motionless beside him, her gaze locked on the void beyond the spire's translucent walls. The battle had been brutal, surgical, efficient. Human ships had moved with a precision that bordered on prophetic, their weapon systems singing in perfect harmony. Every shot had been a verse in an old song. Thalolan, the Malthari scientist, finally broke the silence. His voice was a whisper, barely audible over the hum of the spire's atmospheric condensers. "You knew they would come." Harriman didn't turn. "We hoped they wouldn't." Malvar's secondary eyes flickered, adjusting to the shifting light as the last of the Voidborn wreckage tumbled into the gravity well of a nearby gas giant. The humans had not just anticipated this attack, they had prepared for it. Their ships, their weapons, their very bodies bore the marks of a war that had never truly ended. He studied Harriman again, this time, noting the faint, almost imperceptible glow beneath her skin, a telltale sign of neural augmentation. The humans had not merely preserved their old war machines, they had evolved with them. Outside, the human fleet regrouped, their vessels sliding into formation with an eerie synchronicity. Their hulls, once thought primitive by Malthari standards, now revealed their true nature, layered with adaptive armor that shimmered like liquid metal, their weapon ports still humming with residual energy. And then there was Captain Shepard. The human soldier stood at the edge of the command platform, his posture relaxed, but his eyes sharp. Malvar had seen warriors before, but Shepard was something else. His muscles moved with the precision of a machine, his reflexes honed beyond natural limits. When he turned his head, the faintest glint of cybernetics flashed beneath his skin. This was what humanity had become. Not conquerors, not monsters. Thalolan's voice trembled. "How long have you been waiting for this?" Harriman finally turned, her lips curling into something that wasn't quite a smile. "Since the first time they burned one of our worlds." Malvar felt the weight of those words settle into his bones. The Malthari had records of the Voidborn, fragmented, half-remembered nightmares from a time before their civilization had reached the stars. But the humans, they had fought them, and they had never forgotten. The tactical display flickered again, this time projecting a new set of coordinates, a distant system, its star marked with a sigil that sent a ripple of recognition through the Malthari crew. Thalolan inhaled sharply. "That's a staging ground." Harriman finished. Their next target. Malvar's pulse quickened. The humans weren't just defending, they were hunting. And now, they were offering the Malthari a choice: stand aside, or stand with them. The air in the spire grew heavy, charged with the weight of the unspoken question. Outside, the human fleet's engines flared to life, their purple, white energy signatures blending with the Malthari's aurora-hued technology until the two forces seemed to breathe. As one Malvar looked at Harriman, then at the void beyond, the trial of fire was not over. It had only just begun. Section Fey, the broken shield, the Malthari command spire hummed, with the dissonance of two civilizations colliding, human warships hovering just beyond the crystalline docking arrays, their angular silhouettes stark against the flowing organic curves of Malthari architecture. The air tasted of ozone and ionized metal, the residual charge of human engines mingling with the aurora, like shimmer of Malthari atmospheric condensers. Malvar's talons flexed against the translucent control panel, his bioluminescent veins pulsing erratically. The tactical display before him showed the truth in merciless clarity. The human fleet wasn't just positioned defensively. Their formations were predatory, ships coiled like wolves ready to lunge. Their weapon ports glowing faintly, not with the steady luminescence of standby, but the hungry flicker of systems cycling toward activation. Colonel Harriman stood beside him, her posture relaxed in a way that unsettled him. Humans carried tension differently than his kind, where a Malthari's spines would flare and their energy channels brighten with distress. She merely watched the display with the quiet focus of a surgeon assessing an incision. "They've done this before," Malvar realized, "not just fought but hunted." Thalolan's voice crackled through the spire's comms, strained with disbelief. "They're targeting data. It's not just coordinates. They've mapped weak points." The scientist's holographic projection flickered into existence, his usually pristine silver carapace dulled by stress. Structural vulnerabilities in the enemy's shielding, thermal bleed along their drive conduits, even his voice hitched. Even crew rotation schedules. "This isn't reconnaissance, this is a dissection." Harriman didn't smile, didn't gloat. She simply nodded. "We've had a long time to study them." Malvar's secondary eyelids slid shut for a heartbeat. The humans had fought these creatures before, these demons from the Malthari's oldest nightmares. And where his people had hidden, the humans had learned. Outside, the human flagship, Vigil, activated its primary rail array. The weapon didn't unfold like Malthari plasma lances, with their elegant unfurling of energy channels. Instead, it ratcheted into position, segmented barrels locking with mechanical finality. The sound reverberated through the spire's crystalline bones, a visceral thunk that made Malvar's spine stiffen. Captain Shepard's voice cut through the tension, transmitted from the Vigil's bridge. "Colonel, we've got movement at the edge of the system. Same energy signatures as before." Harriman's gaze didn't waver from the display. "How many?" Malvar's breath caught. The enemy wasn't just coming, they were here. The Lowland's hologram flickered again, his voice hollow. "Our shields, they've never held against a full assault, not against them." Harriman finally turned, her eyes reflecting the tactical display's glow. "Then it's a good thing you're not alone anymore." A shudder passed through the spire as the human fleet shifted formation. Ships that had hovered like sentinels now moved with purpose, their thrusters flaring violet, white as they interposed themselves between the Malthari defenses and the approaching threat. The Vigil's rail array hummed to life, capacitors charging with a sound like distant thunder. Malvar expected hesitation, a moment of doubt. Instead, the humans reacted, faster than thought, faster than fear. The first enemy vessel emerged from the void, its hull a grotesque fusion of chitin and corroded metal, streaming the same sickly energy the Malthari had spent millennia fleeing. The Vigil fired. The railgun's projectile crossed the distance in a blink, striking not the hull, but the precise junction the Lowland had identified as a thermal weak point. The enemy ship buckled, its spine snapping as plasma vented from ruptured conduits. Malvar's pulse pounded in his throat. The humans hadn't just matched the enemy's brutality, they'd surpassed it, and as the rest of the human fleet opened fire, their weapons singing in perfect, terrible harmony, he understood at last. The Malthari had spent ages hiding behind broken shields. The humans had spent theirs forging a sword. The void between stars burned. Malvar's claws dug into the command console, the smooth aerogel surface fracturing beneath his grip as the human fleet moved, not in the staggered, cautious formations of Malthari doctrine, but in a fluid predatory dance, each warship pivoting with terrifying precision, their railgun salvos carving through the enemy vanguard like a scythe through brittle stalks. The Lowland's voice crackled over the comms, thin with disbelief. "They're targeting the neural clusters. Every shot, every single one, is hitting the synaptic nexuses. They're not just destroying them, they're dismantling them." Malvar's secondary eyelids flickered shut for a heartbeat. The humans had never seen these creatures before today. And yet, within minutes, they had mapped their biology, isolated their weaknesses, and turned them into a kill list. On the tactical display, the enemy armada writhed, a grotesque tide of chitin and pulsating veins, their hulls oozing the same violet, black energy that had haunted Malthari nightmares for generations. But now, under the human assault, they bled. A proximity alert shrieked. One of the monstrosities, a Leviathan, class hive carrier, had broken through the artillery line, its maw distending as it vomited a swarm of boarding pods toward the Vigil. Malvar's spines flattened. "Brace for..." The human countermeasure activated before he could finish. From the underbelly of the Vigil, a dozen cylindrical pods ejected, their casings splitting open mid-flight to release clouds of silver-black nanites. The swarm hit the boarding pods like a sandstorm, dissolving chitin, corroding neural tissue, reducing the enemy's assault to drifting, lifeless husks before they could even touch the hull. Malvar's breath caught. The humans hadn't just built weapons. They had engineered plagues. A new transmission cut through the chaos. Colonel Harriman's voice, calm as deep ice. "Malvar, your people have the schematics for their propulsion systems. We need you to jam them." The Lowland's bioluminescent markings flickered in confusion. "Their drives are organic. We've never been able to..." "You have?" Harriman interrupted. "Your ancestors did. That's how they outran them the first time. You just forgot." Malvar's blood turned to liquid nitrogen. The ancient archives, the forbidden texts, the Malthari hadn't just hidden from these creatures. They had fought them, and somewhere, in the ruins of their own history, they had buried the key to breaking them. The Lowland was already moving. crystalline fingers flying across the console as he pulled data from the deepest vaults of their databases. The answer surfaced like a corpse from the depths, a frequency, a resonance pattern, a song that had once made the monsters scream. The vigil's atmospheric condensers flared to life, channeling raw ionization into the void. The pulse wasn't a weapon, it was a memory. The effect was instantaneous. The enemy ships convulsed, their fleshy drive cores seizing as the harmonic vibration ripped through them. Veins burst, membranes ruptured. For the first time in 1,000 years, the creatures that had hunted the Malthari to the edge of extinction faltered. And the humans pounced. Railguns cycled faster, plasma lances carving through paralyzed hulls. Captain Shepard's voice cut over the comms, sharp with triumph. "That's it. They're locked down." "Hit them now," Malvar watched, something primal uncoiling in his chest as the tide of battle turned, not with the slow, grinding inevitability of Malthari warfare, but with the brutal, beautiful efficiency of human wrath. They weren't just winning, they were erasing them. And as the last of the enemy carriers detonated in a chain reaction of collapsing warp cores, Malvar realized the galaxy had spent eons fearing the wrong monsters. Section Fe, the aftermath, the silence that followed the battle was heavier than the void itself. Malvar's command spire hummed faintly, its bioluminescent panels dimmed to a bruised violet, as if the ship itself was exhausted. The viewport displayed the graveyard of the enemy fleet, twisted, ruptured carcasses drifting in the black. Their once terrifying organic hulls, now nothing more than lifeless husks. The humans had done more than defeat them. They had unmade them. His talons flexed against the crystalline console, the reality settling into his bones like a slow-acting toxin. We were wrong, not just about the humans, about everything. The Malthari had spent centuries perfecting the art of survival. Calculating, cautious, always retreating before the storm. But the humans, they had charged into it. They had taken the nightmare of the past and burned it from the sky. A flicker of movement drew his gaze. On the tactical display, the human vessels, scorched, battered, but still operational, were regrouping. Their energy signatures pulsed erratically, their armor pockmarked with wounds that would have crippled a Malthari warship. Yet they moved with the same relentless purpose as before. "They don't stop." The Lowland's voice was a whisper beside him, his crest flattened in awe. The archives, they called them demons, but they were never the monsters, they were the fire. Malvar didn't answer. His thoughts were a storm. Colonel Harriman's face filled the calm screen, her features smeared with soot, one eye swollen shut. She looked like death given flesh, and yet, when she spoke, her voice was steady. "Malvar, status." He hesitated. The protocols of war demanded a report, a tally of losses, of damages, but the words that left him were something else entirely. "You knew," a beat. Then, the barest flicker of something human in her gaze, regret, or maybe just exhaustion. "We guessed." She exhaled, long and slow. "Our deep, range scouts found traces of them years ago. The same biosignatures, the same hunger. We just didn't know they were yours." Malvar's spine stiffened. "You built weapons specifically to kill them." "We built weapons to kill anything that comes for us," she corrected, her voice like iron. "And anyone we call ally we protect." The weight of that statement settled between them. Protection, not just for themselves, for the Malthari, for the child they had saved a century ago. The Lowland made a soft, wounded sound beside him. Shepard's voice crackled over the open channel, raw with adrenaline. "Colonel, we've got a problem." The screen split, revealing the feed from his fighter. A single enemy vessel, smaller than the others, its hull shimmering with unstable energy, was drifting toward the edge of the system. "It's trying to jump." Harriman's jaw tightened. "It's a scout. If it gets away, it warns the rest." Malvar finished, dread coiling in his gut. The humans had won this battle. But if the enemy learned of their weakness, if they adapted, Harriman didn't hesitate. Shepard, burn it down. The fighter's engines flared, a streak of fire in the dark. Malvar watched, something dark and unnameable rising in his chest. As the human ship closed the distance, the galaxy had spent eons fearing the wrong monsters. Now, the monsters would learn to fear them. The last echoes of battle faded into the void, leaving only the drifting wreckage of the enemy fleet, twisted metal and cooling plasma, the remnants of a force that had once believed itself unstoppable. Malvar stood on the observation deck of the Dawn's Resolve, his crystalline fingers pressed against the transparent alloy. The stars beyond burned cold and indifferent, but the sight of the human fleet, massive, scarred, victorious, sent an unfamiliar warmth through his veins. They had won, not just survived, not just endured, they had won. Thalolan approached silently, his bioluminescent markings flickering with exhaustion and something deeper, something like awe. His voice was a whisper, barely audible over the hum of the ship's atmospheric stabilizers. They were real. Malvar didn't need to ask what he meant. The ancient archives of the Malthari spoke of a species long vanished, a race of nightmares, creatures who had once carved their way through the galaxy with fire and teeth. The texts called them demons. The scholars had dismissed them as myth. And yet here they stood, in the flesh, not demons. The realization settled over Malvar like a weight. The galaxy had spent eons fearing the wrong monsters. The observation deck's doors hissed open behind them, and Colonel Harriman stepped through, her boots ringing against the crystalline floor. She was still in her combat rig, the blackened edges of her armor bearing the marks of near misses and glancing blows. Her face was calm, but her eyes, sharp, calculating, burned with something fierce. She stopped beside them, following their gaze out into the void. "You saved one of ours," she said finally, her voice low. "A century ago." Malvar inclined his head. "We did." Harriman exhaled, a slow, measured breath. "That child grew up, told stories, made sure we never forgot." Thalolan's breath hitched. "Then this was a debt." Harriman finished. "Paid in full." Silence stretched between them, thick with unspoken understanding. Malvar turned back to the stars. The enemy had been broken here, but they were not gone. The war was not over, but for the first time in centuries, he did not feel the crushing weight of inevitability. Because now, the monsters had something to fear. Now, they had guardians. Harriman's calm crackled, Shepard's voice, rough but triumphant, echoed through the channel. "Scouts, Ash, Colonel, no survivors." A ghost of a smile touched her lips, and as the human fleet turned its gaze toward the next battle, the stars themselves seemed to tremble.